Well, it's good morning or afternoon, depending on your location. Thanks for joining us for the second part of a three-part webinar series. We're hosting you, Smartlogic and Summit 7 Systems. So I'd like to welcome you to the Govern, Secure, and Manage Your Documents in SharePoint with Content Intelligence webinar. So we've done something interesting today. We've actually brought two accents to you. Mine's from Alabama, and we've got Charlie Holland joining us from Smartlogic. He brings an accent from Scotland, so hopefully you'll be able to understand most of what we're talking about. Getting to the speakers, we do have Charlie Holland. Charlie brings over 15 years of experience with companies such as Microsoft, IBM, Sony, HP, and for the last 3 years he's been working with Smartlogic to help develop and enhance the product offering Semaphore. He is also an author and blogger. And so hopefully you'll check out his book on SharePoint 2010 apps, and also take a look at his blog. My name is Patrick Fleming. I'm Vice President of Summit 7 Systems, and I'm responsible for sales and partnerships for Summit 7 Systems. And if you'll indulge me, for the first few minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about Summit 7 Systems, probably why we're here and what we might be able to do to help you guys. I'll try not to take too much time on the salesy side. That is what I do after all, and I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy working with customers like yourself. So I'll jump into that, and then we'll turn it over to Charlie after that, where he'll get nice and technical, and hopefully show you some really interesting demos and make it worth your time. So who's Summit 7 Systems? We are an implementation partner and reseller of Smartlogic. We have some great customer examples that we've worked well with Smartlogic together with. I'm not going to read a whole lot of stuff on the slides. Some of these slides get pretty busy, but you'll be able to look at it later when you can download the webinar and review. But we are authors of 7 books on the SharePoint platform, most with Microsoft Press. The latest one's coming out on Pearson publications on SharePoint 2013. Probably the most germane thing and important thing from my perspective, and probably from your perspective too, is the fact that Summit 7 has a 100% customer retention rate. I've been here 3 years, and that's probably one of the most amazing statistics I could throw at you. Once people work with us, they like us, and we love our customers, and I'll get into why. Why do we have that? A little bit about our background. Look at our Microsoft competencies over there on the left-hand side. That actually does put us in the top 1% of Microsoft partners worldwide. We've just been named to Inc. 500 list, fastest growing companies. KM World gives us 100 companies that matter most in knowledge management. So we've got a lot of accolades, but all that technical expertise, fast growth, that's not so important to you as a customer. I think what's the important thing is what we do for you guys, what makes us different. First, I'll talk about what do we do. See, there's the busy slide I talked about. We certainly are focused on the SharePoint platform. We also, you can see the other things we do. Enterprise search, a very deep level of expertise there, and obviously working with great partners like Smartlogic. So I will pop to the next one. You may or may not have seen our consultants speaking. We do a ton of presentations all around the country and the world. Anywhere from SharePoint Conference, Microsoft SharePoint Conference, Enterprise Search Summit, various ones, SB TechCon. We were just in Boston presenting. So you may see them there. In addition, if you haven't checked out our website and our blogs, our consultants spend a great deal of time putting out some very good technical blogs. So hopefully you can get some benefit from that if you guys haven't already checked out some of the blogs we post. So again, just trying to contribute back to the community and share some of our knowledge and experience that we've encountered from dealing with our customers and helping them with the challenges. So I get to the why Summit 7 slide. To me, it's really simple. Two different things. The methodology, I think, a lot of companies, I wouldn't say a lot, there are other companies out there that have deep technical expertise. However, we have that, and we have a proven methodology. A lot of our guys came out of NASA, where they were, had a methodology they used to really support mission-critical shuttle missions, utilizing SharePoint to do some of that. And so we brought that methodology over, and the company was founded in 2008, and over the last 5 years, it's really been refined and working with customer after customer And what that's going to do, and I think it relates back to 100% customer retention rate. How do we do that? We deliver on time, we deliver on budget, and that's why people come back to us. We do what we say we're going to do, and how long, and all of that. That really matters to customers, and I appreciate that. The other thing is the partner relationships, much like the one we're working on with Smartlogic here, and the certifications. When we have to take on a partnership, we make sure our folks on our staff are certified on the solutions, understand the solutions, how they work, how to implement them, how to deliver them. So looking at a holistic approach in a SharePoint project, we can go all the way from business requirements all the way through design, architecture, implementation, migration, and then also bringing third-party products to bear to enhance and really meet the business requirements and help the companies meet the goals. In a one-stop shop. We're not sending you 3, 4, 5 different places, so we can bring it all together and work with the various partners on that. And I guess, Charlie, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you get into the fun stuff and why most of the folks probably came to this webinar.
Thanks for that, Patrick. So what I wanted to do before we get into the nuts and bolts is give you a quick overview of what Semaphore is. In a nutshell, Semaphore is an enterprise content intelligence platform. So you might be thinking, what does that actually mean? Well, by enterprise we mean that the platform is scalable. So that's to say that it's capable of handling large volumes of data, and it's capable of operating in a distributed environment. We also mean that it's heterogeneous. So that's to say that it's integrated with a range of line of business applications and document management platforms. And of course SharePoint is one, that's why we're here today. In terms of SharePoint, we support MOS, SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013. So what do we mean by content intelligence? Well, I'm pretty sure everybody on the call here today has heard of big data. It's the idea that organizations are managing ever-growing mountains of information. Well, content intelligence is all about extracting the value from these mountains of information. So you may be thinking, Charlie, that's big talk. It sounds a bit utopian. What do you actually mean by extracting value? Well, the thing about value is that it's relative. What's valuable to one organization may be useless to another. So what Semaphore actually allows you to do is model what's important to your organization. And once we have that model, we can use it to categorize these mountains of unstructured data. And once we have that categorization, that allows us to focus on what's valuable in any given scenario. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much what Semaphore brings to the party. Let's move on to look at how this actually helps you. How does content intelligence actually help you to govern, secure, and manage your documents in SharePoint? When we use terms like govern, secure, and management, what we're really talking about is information governance. And information governance, if you boil it down, is all about consistency. It's about consistency in the storage of information, consistency in the retrieval of information, and in fact consistency in any processing of information. It's pretty familiar to us as SharePoint practitioners. We've had a range of information governance tools in SharePoint since MOS practically. But despite these tools, information governance, it isn't a feature. There isn't a giant information governance button in SharePoint. There isn't a checkbox. It isn't something we can just switch on. It's a high-level strategy. And we've got a range of tactics at our disposal to implement this strategy. Two of the main tactics that often come up in the SharePoint world are business process management. That enables consistent processing of information, and it's commonly implemented in SharePoint via workflows. Most of us are going to be familiar with these workflows. But it's also built into the platform, and that's something that's often overlooked. These are the things that we often see built as information governance tools in the SharePoint world. So for example, the content approval workflow, that's been around since MOS practically, and it does what it says in the tin. Other things like information management policies, these allow us to audit content and apply expiration policies, etc. Records management, the eDiscovery Center, a new thing in 2013. So these are all widely used business processes that Microsoft actually provides for us as part of the SharePoint platform. Another key tactic then is information architecture. Now SharePoint architects spend a lot of time talking about information architecture, and for good reason. If we don't have information architecture, a SharePoint farm very quickly becomes a black hole. You know, there's an infinite amount of content in there, but we've got no sensible way to actually get it out and make use of it. So findability is then a big driver for information architecture. You know, we design this architecture so that we know where our content is and so that we can then get it back out when we need it. So information architecture at a high level deals with storage and in many cases security because of the way things work in SharePoint. You know, we tend to secure locations as opposed to specific documents. It's easier to manage. And it also deals with metadata, making sure that metadata is applied consistently across content. So what we're really saying here is that information architecture helps us to understand what we're dealing with, whereas business process management helps us to understand how we should deal with it. And if we can ensure consistency in information architecture and business process management, then we can better achieve the goals of an information governance policy. So moving on, let's look at how we can apply content intelligence to business process management. As I said, workflow is the main way to implement business process management in SharePoint. We're going to model processes using Visio, SharePoint Designer, or Visual Studio. But many of these processes are going to require some form of user interaction. So for example, a content approval process, it might rely on a user to apply editorial guidelines. But the problem here is that user interaction is subjective. One user might be happy to approve content, whereas another may not. It's going to depend on their interpretation of the editorial guidelines. So what we're saying here is that this subjectivity means we have a lack of consistency. Content intelligence allows us to analyze our content and make determinations automatically and therefore consistently. And we've got an example of that in a bit later. Moving on then, how do we apply content intelligence to information architecture? Well, the goal when we're talking about information architecture is to build and maintain a robust architecture. And there are a few use cases that surround this. One of the first ones is migration. You know, it's all fine and well having a fabulous architecture in paper, but we need to stick content in there before it's actually going to be useful. So let's say we're moving content from MOS or SharePoint 2010 or some other system into SharePoint 2013. What we generally do is develop the information architecture up front. So we've got our content types and our file plan and our site collection structures, etc. But then we need to decide how are we going to do this migration. What should actually be migrated? Where should it go? What should its content type be? What metadata are we going to need? And once we've answered these questions, we need to decide how we're actually going to do this work. We could do it manually, but there's a few problems there. The first problem is that it's time consuming. In fact, in many cases, it might even be impossible because content's changing and being added faster than we can possibly migrate it. The other problem with doing it manually is consistency. As we've said, users are subjective. Different users might have different opinions on what a document is and where it fits within the information architecture. So another way of doing this, and this is where content intelligence comes in, is doing it automatically. Content intelligence is going to ensure this consistency. It's going to automatically determine whether an item should be migrated. And it's going to automatically determine what the content type is. It's going to automatically apply any metadata that needs to be added. And it's going to automatically determine where the item should go within the SharePoint farm. So this gives us a sort of rough idea as to what content intelligence can do, but migration is obviously a big subject, and we run a separate webinar with our partner Kapow Software, which covers this in more detail. Another use case is automatically applied metadata. You know, we've defined this fabulous information architecture, but as users add and update content, we're trusting them to add the appropriate metadata. We've got the same problem we mentioned before, consistency versus subjectivity. Users are subjective, but it's made worse by the fact that users don't like adding metadata. They want to go on with whatever it is they're trying to do. They don't want to populate 20 fields with metadata. So a lot of times they're just going to leave it blank, and that's going to cause us problems with a fabulous information architecture that we've spent a lot of time building. So we've got an example later about how we can apply this metadata automatically using the Content Intelligence platform. Another use case is automatically applied content types. Now, content types are the core of the SharePoint information architecture toolset, as I'm sure we're all aware. And they're also one of the touch points between information architecture and business process management. It's via these content types that we can attach policies and workflows and various other things to content. And again, we have the same problem there. If we trust users to select the appropriate content type, we've got the subjectivity versus consistency problem. Will they select the correct one? And selecting the wrong content type has implications. You know, it breaks this connection between information architecture and business process management. So it's very important to get that consistent. So we've got an example of that as well. So let me switch to my demo machine and we'll go through a few of these examples. So the first thing I want to show you is business process management. So let's take as an example a common problem. SharePoint is by nature a collaborative platform. Users can upload documents and other users can then see those documents. But what happens if a user uploads a document that contains sensitive information? They're inadvertently making that document available to other users. So what we want to do is set up a business process whereby these uploaded documents that contain this sensitive information are moved to a secure area where they're not publicly visible. So as we said earlier, we would generally implement these business processes using workflows in SharePoint. And what I've got here is an example of a simple workflow that I prepared earlier using SharePoint Designer. Let's just quickly walk through this. So in the first step of the workflow, we're going to examine the document. What we're doing here is sending the document to the Semaphore platform for classification. We're going to get the result back there, and if the document contains sensitive information, we're going to lock it down. So what we're actually checking to see is if the document sensitivity is set as PII, which means personally identifiable information, we're going to copy the item to a sensitive documents folder, which is secure, and we're going to create a task for the user who added the document, inviting them to go back and review this document, just alerting them to the fact that the document's been moved. We're then going to email the administrator, in this case Stuart Laurie, and we're going to delete the item that was originally uploaded, so at that point it isn't publicly available. So let's see how that works in practice. So this is just a standard SharePoint document library. It has that workflow attached to it. And what I'm going to do here is just upload a few documents. So let's take these two. Okay, so they're now uploaded. Let's take a quick look at these documents actually. So the first document, Resume Stuart Laurie, this is a pretty basic document. It doesn't contain anything particularly sensitive in there. The next document, Personnel File, let's open that. So this is a personnel file and it contains a social security number. So we want to treat that as personally identifiable information, and we don't want to make that document publicly available. So let's take a look at what's happened. So when the page refreshes, we see that Resume Stuart Laurie is in the document library, as we would expect. This was the document that didn't contain anything particularly controversial. The other document, the personnel file, we see isn't in there. Now it's been moved to the sensitive documents folder, as we would expect, based on our workflow, and it's been flagged with a sensitivity of PII. And if we go to the home page in this site, we can see that a task has been created inviting me to go back and review this. So the workflow there has done pretty much what we expected. It's moved the document into sensitive documents and it's created this task. But it's done this automatically. There's no need for a user to review this document and determine whether it contains sensitive information. There's basically no way to upload a document that contains sensitive information and bypass this workflow. So that's that demo. The next thing I wanted to show you was automatically applying metadata. So let's take, this is a SharePoint 2013 form. Again, standard document library. And what we're going to do here is just upload the document. So let's take this one, Childcare Bill Summary. SharePoint 2013, we can just drag and drop, which is all very clever. And that takes a few seconds to do what it needs to do. Okay, so we're done. So let's look at the properties. So we can see that in here we have a column called some metadata. I added this earlier, and it's been automatically populated with a range of tags. So these tags have come from the Semaphore platform. The document was sent for classification, and these are basically the results. One thing you might notice is that these tags are different colors. Now the reason for that is that this document is more about child care than it is about schools development plans. So if I click on child care, for example, we can see it's got a score of 0.86, so that's relatively high, whereas skills development plans has a relatively low score of 0.2. So we can see at a glance what the most relevant terms are for this document. Now you can add as many of these columns as you need to, and you can apply various filters and rules to get exactly the metadata that you need in here. And this metadata is updated when the document is added at first, but it's also updated when the document is updated. So if I was to go and change this PDF in SharePoint, as soon as I save it back to SharePoint, it's going to go back again to Semaphore, and these tags are going to be updated. So that's that one. The third demo I wanted to show you was automatically setting content types. So we're back here in SharePoint 2010, and what I want to do again is just upload a document. Let's take heritage protection this time. So this is a PDF document, so it doesn't contain any metadata that's going to be picked up by SharePoint. So we can see here the content type set to document, no metadata, it's just got the name of the document and nothing else. So we're going to leave that as is, we're just going to click and submit, and we're going to let the platform do its work. Okay, so we're done. So let's just refresh this library and see what's happened. So what we can see is that a document's been added, but the content type is set to local gov docs. Now this is one that I set up earlier, and that there's additional metadata here. We have services and topics, and these two columns have automatically been populated behind the scenes. Now if we look at this content type, let's go to library settings. We can see that there is an information management policy attached here. So what we've been able to do here by automatically setting the content type is automatically populate required metadata and also automatically attach any business processes that are required. So in this case I've got a retention policy and I've enabled auditing, but obviously we could do a lot more there with content types in SharePoint 2010. So that's pretty much it for my demos. Let me jump back to the slides. So moving on to my final slide here, just to summarise what we've seen so far, what we've said is that information governance is a high-level goal that's all about consistency. And we've seen that content intelligence helps us to achieve that goal by driving consistency in the various use cases that support a robust information architecture, and also by giving us more flexibility by adding a few tools to the SharePoint information architecture toolset. And finally, by driving consistency by allowing more automation and business process management. So the key point I wanted to make in this presentation is that each and every minute we're generating more content, and we're consuming valuable resources to maintain that content. If we can get our information governance house in order, we can make real use of these information assets, and content intelligence goes a long way to helping us achieve that goal. So that's pretty much it from me. I'm going to hand back to Patrick, and we're going to take some questions, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Charlie. Great job. Definitely got some questions that came in. I guess before that, I'll just mention to everybody, we will be having the third and final presentation in this series on September 18th. On that one, you won't get to hear from the likes of Patrick, the VP of Sales. You'll get to hear from two technical heavy hitters from the Summit 7 Systems team. Be Ben Curry, Principal Architect, and also Daniel Webster, Enterprise Search Expert, and big Smartlogic fan. So we'll be having that one coming up soon, and then also I believe Stuart Laurie from Smartlogic will be joining us as well. And if we could just advance to the next slide there, Charlie, and we'll jump into the questions here. Let's see. Charlie, you ready? I think this one's for you. Does automatic content type updating work with the content organizer feature?
Well, basically, yes. The content organizer feature allows administrators to configure rules that determine where content ends up when it's uploaded. What the content type updater does is it extends this functionality by adding rules that also determine the content type. So once the content type's been set, as we saw in the demo, any metadata can also be populated automatically, and the item can be moved to the appropriate place. So the two things kind of work hand in hand.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Hey, this is great. We've got a lot of questions here. So let's see. Does this stuff work with Content Type Hub?
Yes. Basically, the Content Type Hub is a new thing that came around in 2010, and that allows us to manage content types easier. In MOS, it was a pain because we had to manage them at the site collection. This allows us to define them centrally. The semaphore columns that I showed earlier when we demonstrated automatically adding metadata, these can be added to content types, and these content types can be managed by the hub. So yes, we can certainly do that. Okay, great. Let's see, what about metadata that's stored in the term store? Metadata that's stored in the term store. The way the Semaphore platform works is you would define a model in Semaphore. That model, although it's used in SharePoint, can also be synchronized with a term store. So what you've effectively got is a term store representation of that model that you can use in the same way as a manually created term store. So yeah, we can use term store stuff as well. Okay. And I'll say to the audience, any question that we don't get to, we got a hard stop on the half hour, and if we don't get to all of them, we will be responding with those offline. So we'll be able to address those. You mentioned scalability. Can this be used across multiple farms? Yes, the Content Type Hub and the term store sync that I was talking about can be used across multiple farms. So what that means is that if you define a model in the Semaphore platform, that same model can be synchronized with multiple term stores and multiple farms, and it's going to look exactly the same in each of these farms. Now at the moment in SharePoint there's no easy way to do that. You know, if you recreate a term store, it's going to look different in each farm. So yeah, we can certainly do that. Okay. And we're probably in the last 30 seconds here. I got a couple, we're not going to go to all the questions here, but we'll try the last one. We use SharePoint Search to crawl external content. Is there any way to apply metadata to that? Yes, there is. although we've seen here how we can apply metadata in SharePoint, so via columns and stuff like that, we can also apply metadata via the crawl process. So we have a stage that sort of fits in the middle there, and that's going to call Semaphore, classify your content, and add that additional metadata to the search pipeline. So that's going to work in the same way as though the content originated in SharePoint. So yeah, we can do that as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're at the hard stop here. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We will make this available, I think, in 2 business days. You'll be able to download the presentation, the recorded version, maybe share with your colleagues, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions, and we will be answering the ones that we received that we couldn't address here on the call. And thanks again, everybody, and thank you, Charlie. Great job.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.